We ready?
Calissa, we live?
All right. Meeting back from recess, the Annual Budget Committee. I believe I have it on.
And yes, we are.
And on the schedule for currently, and sorry I'm 5 minutes late, is adult probation. Just sit right here at the microphone. And we will All right, so any changes or anything in your budget? I heard there was something that you wanted to discuss. I can't.
First, regarding our this 2020 was the first year. But regarding our general budget, this was the first year that probation was separated out. So this is separate. So I basically asked for the same last year. So far, office by but again, our office pretty close to March. So we also have a grant out in the and this is funded for corrections. It is out for us last year that probation supplemental probation. I did ask for an increase. This fund is used for training needs for our department, and it's also used to pay salary staff. I did ask for an increase, but travel registration. The reason I asked for that have to increase our additional probation officer and it's cheaper. See what our training requirements are for I got that paper. And then I also need to discuss salaries that are done. This was put in place by the prior chief, and we're at the point where that fund and it was done. And this money, as long as we take that $2,000 a month, pay those two salaries, that. And I have documentation on that.
Please. Okay. Get on the right page here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. On the first page, I but our training requirements I did provide the what the two salaries are and how that's estimated for rent from building. What do you think?
Right. We added 2 people last year? 3, okay. Three through our grant, right?
They were 3 positions. As per request. It was also the recommendation. No, not 6 officers added
The pre
They had
probation?
they had 3 new probation officers, yes, Councilman Moritz. It was funded by you, the council, last year. And you also, under the court budget, you had also funded a pretrial screener, yes. The court had 2 pretrial screeners, and that might be what you're looking at, that was funded through a grant last
Okay.
year.
All right.
I know it kind of all gets confusing sometimes with these positions under the court.
So you don't have any grants this year that are ending?
We have our OC.
Okay. All right.
And they just submitted, probation just submitted their grant application for that last week, so.
We take it to 4, it's with 1 addition.
No, it's only,
Yeah,
Again,
just asking for the renewal of that
yeah,
grant.
there's a total of 6.
It doesn't anymore, but it's part of that, yes. Yes.
what does Popeye stand for?
It's a professional work.
Okay.
Oh,
Probation officers, professional Association of Indiana. I can't think what the other P is for. I'll think of it in a minute, but.
training.
You got it,
POP.
probation.
Officer, Professional Association
Of Indiana.
of Indiana.
Mhm. And I
All right.
apologize, I'm Bill Watson, Director of Court Services. I started talking and didn't tell you who I was. I apologize.
All right. Yeah. So I think that one thing that would help me is how you've been operating in our current environment, like caseload, maybe.
So I brought the currently together, but our, right, as of today, we got 1,000. So I have that broken down by officer and kind of breaks that, like, in addition, we also asked, this is remote
So that breaks down to almost 91 offenders per probation officer.
Approximately, yes.
But am I recalling correctly that it used to be around 200? In the report, it seems like,
Right now, for example, one officer has 257, one has 78, one has 108, and then our newer officers started, one has 7.
They're dragging that average, I shouldn't say dragging, they're making that average caseload currently smaller than what it appears with those new officers that started at 0 caseload, where they're spreading it out over the others, Lisa.
what's the target is what?
Nationally, they say the preferred caseload used to be 70,
Appreciate it.
and
Bring me
it
up
might
to
be
speed.
75 now, but yeah, they're well above national caseload, what they're supervising right now, even with the
Thank you.
addition of staff. And breaking it down, as she's talked about, that is based on the fact that the 3 new officers that came on are getting people that were not going the other way, which would have made those higher, as you were talking about.
One more thing with those who are who would be supervised high and moderate risk. And with the breakdown of this vote on those who were proposed that we assigned to probation officers. So this was based on our figures at the time I sat down, but approximately we get per those officers. But that's the and then those have needed officers that handle trying to make it more efficient and specialized. Going along with that, we request judges to grow money that's to do that rapidly. We really need some for a hope that would create peace for high and moderate risk rest and services rest. But also our officers success and these crimes. Some in what for and using motivation in our offices and also very desensitized rest and so almost part of situation. And that is kind of the direction this compliance case is now evident.
I apologize. But as that is the direction they're wanting probation to go, and what we've done in the past doesn't really work. So we're trying to get it in line with what the recommendations are for probation.
These were all things that the judges had spoke with me about, and then Leanne, when she came on board, when they restructured everything under the umbrella of court services with the director of court services, they wanted to ensure that that was the avenue being followed, that we went a new way. And Leanne and I have spent a lot of time talking about that. As you can see, she's done a really good job. She was putting a lot of effort into it, and we were making a lot of headway till COVID slowed us down. But we still have a lot of plans, and she's done a lot in a short period of time. So the courts have basically changed the entire direction that the probation department is going. They've, simpler terms, they've done a 180 from what they used to do to what they're asking them to do now and what they're expecting of them. So the whole restructuring thing was something that the courts had talked with me about, and I talked with Leanne about specialization, certain officers handling certain duties within certain courts. They felt that way, and Leanne and I have talked about it as well. Officers aren't bogged down. We don't have 16 probation officers doing the same thing every day, all day, and wondering why we're not making any progress. So changing course with that, with 16 people at one time, has been a challenge, but it's getting there, and I'm happy with the results that we're seeing from there, for sure.
Well, I think that one thing that the council, well, all of us, as far as that goes, anybody in county government right now, struggling with is we had plans, and those plans have been, had to be adapted, I guess, being a good way to say it. And we talked about this previously, and trying to compare that to, and make good sense of it, I guess. So, you said 341 pretrial reports?
Pre-sentence investigations.
Pre-sentence, okay.
Yes, sir.
Pre-sentence.
Referred to as PSI reports. These are ordered prior to sentencing hearing. It's kind of an investigation we put together. It entails the offender's criminal history, education, any mental health history they have, employment history, and so that the judge can review all that and make an informed decision.
Well, yeah, seems like a lot of work.
And
It is, sir.
they're required by statute. So even the courts and the probation officers have no choice about that
Right.
report.
Yeah,
It's required that they prepare.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay.
Do you keep the same people working for each court? Are they assigned to a court?
Right now, they're not, and that's what we're proposing because we feel like that would improve communication as well if we just had 2 officers assigned to a specific court. Because right now we have Division 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and every judge likes things done. Although we're trying to get consistent, they have their preference on how they like their reports filed, how they like. So I feel like that would improve communication, one, and then the courts would know which officer's handling their cases. And it also, in doing that, will somewhat make them more specialized officers as well. For example, Division 4 handles most of our domestic violence offenses. Division 5 handles most of our alcohol-related offenses. So in doing that, that'll kind of make them more specialized in that way as well.
That's what I was thinking. It would maybe flow more easily and
Yes.
make their work easier.
it absolutely would. I think it would make it quicker for everyone
I-
too.
Right.
yes,
the
I
courts
think-
and the probation department
Make us run much
Much-
smoothly. Yes.
much faster at what we're doing.
And can make us more effective because, like I said, instead of doing everything, we can just focus on what's been assigned to
Right.
us. And the goal also in my proposal was for 3 intake officers, which we don't do that right now. And the hope would be that way those officers can be at court. So when someone is sentenced, they can be put on probation immediately. They're leaving the courthouse knowing what the conditions of their probation are and leaving with a follow-up appointment, which would be an intake where that officer would do the risk assessment. We would only have 3 of those, and part of the additional training would be requesting that they even get more specialized risk assessment. For example, there's a static 99 that's specifically for sex offenders. There's another risk assessment sorry, trying to talk fast in my time, specifically
Don't worry
for
about your time, we're
alcohol-related
fine.
offenses. But another direction I'd really like to go, and I've been talking to Judge Mulligan about this, is being more trauma-informed. I think that's a big piece that we're missing in our department. A lot of times people have trauma in their lives, and they keep doing the same things over and over because there's that underlying trauma that's never been addressed. So that's another piece to our department that we would like to bring and educate our staff, and that would be another assessment that we would like to add so we can start addressing that and trying to get services in place right away.
It sounds like you're getting very well organized. It makes so much sense. That's
Thank you.
terrific.
She's doing a great job.
Mhm.
She really is.
That sounds good.
She's worked very hard at changing a lot of things quickly and then making changes with what we've all dealt with as far as what's going on around us. But she's still kind of managed to hold that together and working with 2 or 3 people at a time in the office for the last several months. So I'm very happy about what we're seeing and what's happening with our adult probation department, and the courts are as well.
Let me
And that's
ask
a
you.
tribute to Leanne and the people that she has working for her right now.
Let me ask you about space. Do you have enough working space?
No, we don't actually.
That's what I'm wondering about that.
We have ran out of offices in adult probation, so we currently, half of our department's on the other side of the building. It's our hope, Bill and I have talked about, there's an area right now that's being used for storage behind the 4E court.
Yes.
So we're hoping, once the jail's built, that we can expand into that space. So it would make us L-shaped, but it would be very nice because it would allow our whole department to be together. It would also allow us to have a conference area where we can do training. Prior to COVID, we were doing weekly staff meetings, which were great. It was improving communication. We could use it for education opportunities. So we're hopeful that that'll be able to happen in the future.
That was something that I had been looking at, and then there came a need for space for records, and one day they magically grew up there. So It kind of took our space for that, but that's something I was looking at and had talked with the commissioners about. But unfortunately, there was a need for that space at that time. Hopefully, as they move out, then Leanne and I definitely have thoughts on how that could be utilized to bring them more into one unified group together. I think one of the things that she hasn't touched on that's really been good from the unification process is as far as the communication and sharing of information between departments, and actually now using the same case management system that we can all look at community corrections, probation, we can all see a lot of the same information and share that, which has streamlined the process significantly for probation as well as community corrections. And we were beginning to share resources that community corrections had available with probation when the COVID stuff hit. We've started using our field staff to help them some. We want to grow that. There's a training position that I'm going to be able to fill that will also help with some of the trainings, just the local trainings that Leanne's talked about, not the required state training, but we will be able to use our dollars from the community corrections side to train with the probation side to kind of help them from that aspect as well. So the whole restructuring thing has brought a lot of positive things to the table, allowing us to share resources.
How has COVID affected the folks that you deal with? I mean, do you see an impact?
Unfortunately, we have. We've seen a great setback with some of our clients, specifically those that struggle with their sobriety. They've relapsed during this time. You know, a lot of AA meetings initially weren't available in AAA meet. Now there are, you can usually find a virtual, and some are starting to meet again. And some of the service providers weren't meeting face to face as well. So yeah, I think just the additional stress it's caused on families, those that have lost their jobs or daycare providers, or just we've seen a decline in some progress that was made prior to COVID.
Is there a consideration that can be given to those folks because of COVID?
We're going to work with them, yes, and try to get them back on track, try to get them back involved with their programming, yes.
Restoring sobriety will be a challenge because, as she said, 4 or 5 months, a lot of these people in treatment terms, they've relapsed. They went back to what they did before. They might have been clean for 2 or 3 months, and I would say now,
Square one.
a lot of them are back to square one. And the longer it's gone on, I have seen an increase across the board in drug screen failures. And we're not screening everyone at high volume, but the ones we are, they are starting to fail now. So the ones that aren't being screened at all, then we know what's happening with them. It's very clear what they're going to look like when we start getting back to that realm again.
Your intake officers, and you might have said this, do they spend more time at the jail or at the courts or at your office?
Well, this will be new. This is what we're proposing, but the plan is that we would create a schedule for them, so that way our administrative staff would know who was to be at courts. I think we're going to do courts weekly, like with the 3. This officer will be in court this week, and have a calendar every month. So, and provide that to both the prosecutor and the courts and our administrative staff, so we all are on the same page as to who will be at court. And then they would also handle, although we're hoping with doing this and having officers at the court, we won't have as many walk-ins as we do now. Because right now we don't have officers at the court, and when they're sentenced, either the defense attorney or judge will tell them report to probation. Well, sometimes they do, sometimes we don't. But you know, when you have scheduled with the high number of caseloads, our time's scheduled and very structured. I mean, we're seeing people one right after the other. Actually, not right now with our COVID restrictions, but prior to that we were. So there wasn't a whole lot of free time, you know, if someone walked in. So we're hoping with officers being at the court, that will alleviate some of that. They'll be able to meet with them immediately after court, and then they'll leave the courthouse with a scheduled appointment. So hopefully that will be more structured for our department as well.
I think that will also help with the fact of the failures to report or the no-shows to get ordered.
That's what I was going to ask.
Over,
yeah.
And then they end up getting a revocation filed, and they ended up getting arrested, and then they go back to jail. So we're hoping that in some ways that will have an impact on that population of people as well.
So for example,
getting
like
service immediately.
a high to moderate risk felon, you have wrote down here face-to-face contact with the probation officer once every 3 months. If they don't make that contact, what's the next step?
Well, we actually are working on a sanctions grid right now, of what we would do. I mean, if it was a first time where they didn't report, we're going to reach out to them. We're going to remind them of that appointment and try to get them in. If this continues to happen, then they would receive a sanction. And we're trying to create a sanctions grid right now so that we're more consistent on how those are handled out. I mean, it would start obviously with like a verbal warning down to they might get community service, to eventually, we're also going to add administrative hearings that would be conducted by myself and my assistant chief, to avoid filing revocations if we can. But continued noncompliance would result in a revocation, and they would have to go back in front of the judge to address why they're not following the court order.
That's part of the consistency and the uniformity that the courts were looking for from program to program. Community Corrections was doing a lot of that already because a lot of it was required by the state for us to do that. The administrative hearings, the sanctioning grids, things like that. And that's where the judges said, well, why are we doing it here? We're not doing it here. We need to be the same way. So that's why when they went with the unified system under the umbrella, then that was one of the things that Leanne was tasked with when she first took over, developing those types of things in probation so that we're all doing the same thing instead of being in 2 or 3 different separate silos, everybody doing their own.
Well, my last question is, after the new jail is built, will you guys have have you talked to Sheriff Glass about having offices in that jail to get people that are coming or getting released on probation after their sentencing? Or
there has been some space, Councilman, that I know has been set aside for the pretrial screeners to utilize and probation officers to utilize for going there to conduct pre-sentence reports and things like that.
Okay.
So hopefully that same space could be utilized for something like that. I don't know why it couldn't
I
be.
was just wondering, because do your PSIs happen as soon as somebody's brought in, or?
Prior to sentencing.
Okay.
Yeah, so for example, if there was a plea agreement that was offered to the court, then the judge would order a pre-sentence investigation so that they could review that prior to the sentencing hearing.
Something that I'm working for with that is those areas down there there won't be per se each individual offices. There'll be workstation offices where they can have a station.
Right.
And my hope is to be able to get the technology needs addressed for them, where that probation officers, they can take Surface laptop, do everything they need from the network there, that initial intake and all of that, versus getting that person from the jail to the building, back out of the building, trying to streamline everything again.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. If there's offices there, then
there is space laid out in that, yes. I met with the judges and the sheriff when they were looking at those areas specifically to find space for probation officers and pretrial screeners to work in.
And I don't know if this is new to me, I'm sorry, but I do have a proposal. I know where it's asking a lot to take on the administrative and office manager salary, but if the user fees, the supplemental fund, was allowed to build back up again, then that would be some funding we could draw from. For example, I know juvenile probation is going to be requesting training monies from the general budget, which they hadn't had to do before, but they have depleted their supplemental fund as well. If our fund was allowed to build back up, we could pay for juvenile probation's training as well as adult probation's funding. Joe Labrie is going to be requesting additional funding so that our entire department will have laptops. We don't have that right now. And when we ran into working from home, that was very difficult for some of our officers that don't have laptops. But in addition to that, we're moving towards going paperless with our department. So that's really going to be needed, especially with our 3 intake officers who are going to be going to the court and operating. So that could possibly be another fee that we could pay for out of that supplemental. And other needs that as they arise, if that fund was allowed to build back up, that would be something we would not have to come to you and ask for money for. We would have it in that fund.
So kind of a trade-off, basically. If you're willing to help with the positions, then adult and juvenile probation would not be asking for dollars for technology improvements and training to send all their staff to. They would use their supplemental fund for that.
What are the outcomes that you are seeing based on, I mean, it's always good to hear about efficiency and effectiveness, consistency. improvements. But what are how are the outcomes changing because of your work?
Well, unfortunately, I just started last August, so everything I'm discussing is kind of in the works. We've made some changes. The restructuring has not been approved yet by the judges. That's what we've proposed. So my hope is that that will be approved and we can start training our staff, and then it can be implemented, hopefully effective January 1st.
So what outcomes do you hope for?
Well, ideally, to reduce recidivism, to improve the safety of the community, to change behavior. I mean, those ideally are what are working towards.
Is it possible to set targets? Not that you would, right,
Well,
but just to, something that you would sort of gauge yourself against and match yourself
yes,
against?
we've done that with our grant. For this year, we have performance measures that we are reporting and submitting to them. Unfortunately, we didn't meet them this last quarter with COVID, but yes, like for example, one of the performance measures we were looking at is that offenders, whenever they complete probation, they fill out an exit survey. And one of the things we're looking at is, did they feel like they had adequate opportunity to participate in the preparation of their case plan? Because it's their life that we're talking about. And actually, we did meet that. We did very well. But just looking at different targets, we have had discussions, because with that, we do have what's called the SRS case management now, so we can track things much better. It's much easier to pull data from it and gather statistics. However, we haven't determined a really good way to look at recidivism, so we have been in discussion about partnering with ISU to figure out a way to start looking at that.
Dr. Barton and I have been talking about that on a couple different occasions. Unfortunately, again, COVID sidetracked that, of doing a study of our system on recidivism across probation, community corrections, but then also looking at helping do some more in-depth study of our pretrial program as well, to look at the impacts of all of those. Because as Leanne said, community corrections side has been required to do performance metrics and stuff for a period of time. Then they started requiring that of probation once they received a grant. That's a standard of those grants now as well. Ideally, I know Leanne's goal is to go beyond those with just, what we're doing now. We get to basically pick our own metrics now. So I think through time, with someone studying our system, then we'll have a better understanding of what we really want to measure and what our results actually are.
Thank you.
You're going to do more. You didn't already have laptops, correct?
No, excuse me. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, no, that's been a challenge for her, because we've pieced and struggled just for the few officers that we could get them for at home that needed them for some medical reasons. I mean, initially when this first broke, she had a couple ladies who really, really did not need to be in the office, but, their
So they have
ability to
two.
work.
One operated from family court, and she has a grant for family court, so she was able to purchase a laptop through that grant. And then the other, actually Bill donated to us, and ITA was able to put it together so she could work from home. But we have 2 laptops for our department right now.
And the one I can tell you it's hanging on luck, basically. It was an old one that I was no longer using in my department. So where we can share and combine resources, I pieced enough together, they looked at it and got it working well enough to get her by in the interim. But I think ideally, that's something they need to look at, especially with the intake officers and their ability to be mobile and travel back and forth to the jail. That's critical for those officers to have that. I mean, right off the bat.
Well, something that popped up to me, and this may be leading us a little bit astray. So what system are you in? Is this the state system? Is this the county system? Is this an overlap? Your records with our,
As far as
see where I'm going?
security,
Right.
right? It's through Insight is what it's called, and through that we can access our case. It's web based, So we're able to log on from any computer or cell phone. I don't know, I can answer technically your question.
Well, you
I know-
weren't,
I
you
I know
weren't,
we discussed it with IT and we were advised it was safe, especially prior to the case management system we had, we were using Odyssey, which is what the courts used. So
Right.
we could not access, we were not allowed to access that from home due to security reasons. But we are now using a different program that's web-based. I'm sorry, this is outside of my area, but I'm told that's not a concern as far as security with the
It's-
county's records.
It's operated by the Office of Court Services for Indiana. It's a secure site.
Yeah.
All her records that she's talking about as far as their case management
Yeah.
system, it's maintained by Office of Court Services, so
Yeah.
it's protected from that access.
okay. Okay. All right. Well, we have some overlap with hardware and purchases and things like that. That's why I guess, yeah.
There, as far as
Okay.
anything that's purchased, it will run fine with that state system.
Yeah.
You know, there's no special requirements or anything like that to operate on it. It doesn't require any specialized hardware to run with it. As she said, the basic need is just internet access primarily, where it's a web-based system. And then the state protects it all from their side through the Office of Court Services.
When somebody needs to check in, do your probation officers go to them, or are they supposed to come to you?
For office visits?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Do you
just
mean during,
like if if you have a laptop now, it has to be internet accessible. So do you guys have like wireless cards?
well, the
or
purpose of asking for the laptops would be to allow our intake officers and our other officers to take them to court. So that way, because our goal is to go paperless, which would also save us a lot of money. But that way they could have their computers with them when they go to court, so they could pull up their case notes and would have their files in front of them to testify. When we prepare our pre-sentence investigations, we could take those to the jail. We could pull up, because the documents in our case management, so we could just fill them out right there. I mean, that would save us time too. As of now, we're writing the information down, taking it back to our offices and enter it in. It would just make us more efficient.
Ideally, as we move forward, and we had started doing this some with them, when the probation officers needed to go to the field, then my field officers had started making those emergency visits with them. Going forward, we'd like to expand on that. And when we do, my field staff has surfaces with MiFi's air cards, Chris. So they would, being on the same system, they could log in, and her probation officers would have the ability to get into their system with that field officer and make case notes on their client from right there if they want, using our services on those visits. That would be another way that I hope to be able to share resources with them in the field as we move forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you think of anything else you need to tell us?
I don't think so.
The furniture, $5,000 for furniture is for,
Well, initially it was, I believe, for our new officers to cover, but we've been very frugal this year because this is the first time we've had our own budget. So we have needs, but we're not purchasing anything because we wanted to make sure our money was going to last. We were unsure with the office supplies. So far, we're doing really well, but there's desks and chairs that need replaced in our department. But we're kind of seeing how the year's going to play out.
Leanne's been pretty thrifty, and so have I, as far as piecing together, borrowing, and finding
Yes.
stuff to get them what they needed with the new officers and to get them going. Again, we had some things with community correction side, some desks and stuff that we provided. There was some things there that from the county had owned from when the A&D officers were there. We kind of pieced together some of that stuff too. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of things, but it's working. Hold it together for now.
As we put this together in the courts, I have a feeling that we're going to have some more questions.
Sure.
So, just or more how we work the different things together. And so I guess in general, Lisa or Becky or Chris, do you have any more questions about
I don't. I think you
the breakout of this program? Data you want back or anything like that?
Are there any services that you all need access to really maybe complete or make everything work better that you just don't have access to? I know there are situations where, for example, there's difficulty getting to assessment services or treatment services in a timely manner. Do you all ever find that and what is that gap and how might we look at, I mean, how over time might we look at filling that if such a gap
And
exists?
actually, that's something we've been talking about with our incentives and sanctions committee. We did have an intern from ISU who came and worked with us this last semester, who was very helpful. She took our resource guide and went through and because we had kind of put together like a resource guide of services. And she went through it. She put together really nice. It's on in a shared file now, so we all have access to it, and it's kind of grouped by shelter, transportation. So we've put everything together. We also did surveys with our offenders to find out what their needs were, so that we can try to focus on that. Transportation sometimes seems to be a big issue. Transportation to counseling, transportation to employment, transportation to services. That seems to be a struggle for people. We talked about that a lot. So we're actually going to reach out to see if we could possibly partner to get bus passes, or with the taxi companies in town. Is there some sort of partnership? We do have a small grant that we got through the Office of Court Services to work towards our incentives and sanctions plan. It's limited. It's $1,200, but I mean it's something. But that's not going to go real far. But yes, did I answer your question?
Yes,
I'm not sure.
yes. Thank you.
Bill, I think you got lucky with Leanne here.
Oh, absolutely.
I think so.
She got hit with a lot when she first took over. Actually, we both did. The courts were anxious for change, and they wanted change they knew it would take time, but they wanted to see things coming quickly. And she and I have spent a lot of time talking, and she's come with me a lot of her ideas, and it's just really just go, 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 because she goes. She really does. So she's done a great job. I can't say enough about what she's done. In a short period of time, our probation department looks nothing like it looked 12 months ago, not even remotely close to the same agency.
That's awesome.
And that's been a lot of her getting the people there to buy in, and the people that she's hired and brought on board that have the skill set that she and I both were already looking for. We've been very fortunate with that. The skill set that she and I knew they needed in that office, she's been really good at finding them with her positions that she's filled. So that's helped a lot as well.
May we ask for maybe an idea, not today, but maybe if you have it, something that you could send to Calissa on what your performance measures are, for example, in the grant,
Sure, I can.
and or the kinds of things that you would like to see, I know that they would be preliminary, because you all have some stuff that you're figuring out and planning, but maybe what your ideas are on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
We have a lot of ideas. It's just how quickly can we get there? Sometimes I think we're both a little bit impatient about how we know what we want. We just can't get there fast enough sometimes. But that's a good thing, especially with Leanne, because she works hard to get there.
All right. Well, again, I think some of the same questions we've asked in the past few years aren't applicable to changes been made, but it looks positive. So we'll different line items, etc. So we'll I've just got a feeling we'll have some more questions.
Sure.
Make sure as we piece it all together. Anything else? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We got, all right. All right, we have drug court, I believe. All right,
You're getting your steps in today.
back on line here.
Thank you.
All right. So, I think probably how does your there any big changes in this or anything?
No, there's not a lot of big changes in the budget for the county. The only, because we have our federal grant, so we are hiring a new case manager next year.
Uh-huh.
But that will be taken care of through the federal grant. We have went from 2017 with 25 participants. We now have 78 active, and we now have 12 that have been found eligible, making us 90, and then we have at least 15 that have been ordered for evaluation. But because of IOCS standards and what's recommended by NADCP, which is the National Association of Drug Court Professionals.
iOS.
IOCS is the Indiana
Yes.
Offices of Court Services.
Okay.
That
all right.
is also our governing body, like as probation. Their standard is 30 per case manager to be effective.
Okay.
So we will be at 90, and then hopefully by next year 120.
Okay.
So you're hiring new covered by a grant for 1 year?
It will actually take, the grant is for 5 years, so it will take care of that person for the next 2 after next year. And then in that, next year we will start writing the grant for the
Okay.
follow-up.
How long's the grant good?
5 years. We're in the second year. We'll start third year in September
Oh, this year?
of this year. Yeah, their fiscal year is different than the county's. It goes from September. Or is it August to September? It may be August to September, Judy. September to October?
October to September.
Okay.
How do you characterize your success and your outcomes, and where are you with that?
Okay, so to measure our success, we do, of course, recidivism, and in our Indiana Offices of Court Services report that we just did, we are at over 50% on retention, which is 1 out of every 2 that come in, which is over the national average. National average is about 38.2%. So we're over that. In that, how we measure our success besides the recidivism is, of course, through relapse, also through retention in the program, as well as things like employment and also treatment retention.
And how, generally speaking, how are you?
We actually, 2 different ways. We have to go through SAMHSA for the grant, so we have to track that with an SRS measuring. And then we are also going into the system that the probation office is. We were not in that training, so we will be trained in November. And in that, their system also keeps track of a lot of different reports. In fact, they told us that if we wanted to, you could actually say, how many people 5'10", blonde hair, blue eyed do you have in the program, and they can give you an estimate.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's pretty miraculous what they can do with reports. We also do an annual IOCS report that tracks all kind of different demographics, race, recidivism, what kind of charges are being brought in, how many per person, and things like that, that we keep track of through that report.
I got a question, but I'm not sure you can answer it with your client confidentiality.
Okay.
Out of your caseload, what percentage or what number would actually be needing or looking for employment?
I would say at least 70%. When they come in because of the arrest and things like that, and trying to get them in within the 50 days, a lot of them have lost jobs or don't have jobs. So we work with different agencies to get them employed. LaborLink, Power, Manpower, all those kind of things, and as well as Hamilton Center has an unemployment agency as well. And as of now, with the 76 that we have that are active, probably coming in, there was, like I said, 70% of that were unemployed, and at this point we only have 6 that are unemployed out of the 76.
So that's a pretty big step.
Yes.
Hmm.
Well, and that's part of the
Well, thank you.
recovery as well, you know, being self-reliant. So that kind of ties into not just the employment for the community and for economic value, but also for recovery.
My thing was to for employers, you know, I mean, we do things with employers,
We do.
tax incentives and things like that, and I'm just, you know, if they help with these things, maybe there's something. I don't know, you know, it might be peripheral, but there's things that we could probably do, or occasionally have an ability to do for jobs in the community.
Yes.
That was my.
Yeah, there are, like you said, there are tax cuts for those who have been incarcerated and things like that. Now we are lucky enough that we have resources that will hire felons, because there are many places that don't. So we have a list of places that they can apply to, and in that, then word of mouth is a good thing too, because we actually have a participant whose father has a large corporation in Paris, and when he found out that his son was in the program, he said, please send participants to me as well. I'd love to give everybody a chance.
Any other questions?
Your 4510 equipment new, what's the plans with the extra $1,000 you need?
For equipment new,
Yeah.
that would be for the new person coming on for computers.
Okay.
And then
You already said that, didn't you? I just wasn't listening.
That's okay.
I was doing math, sorry.
That's all right.
Anything in particular with the driver situation that's caused you particular problems, I guess,
With the what, I'm sorry?
with the virus situation and working?
We, of course, had to respond very quickly, and in that, we had to set up virtual meetings for everybody,
Okay.
because they were working, the staff was working remotely. In that, the judge asked the same thing, and what was funny is he thought that it would be maybe simpler, but because it was not face-to-face, the staff, including myself, because I had a caseload at that time, we were seeing people probably 3 to 4 times a week instead of just once, just to increase that contact to make sure that NADCP recommended that it wasn't just about compliance, but making sure that they were okay. Do you have your resources? Do you have food? Do you have medical? Because in that, if they don't meet their daily needs, then of course relapse starts happening. So to avoid and be proactive rather than reactive, we upped contact with everybody through the pandemic.
I'm chuckling because I'm thinking about my own business. Yeah, it's about 3 times as more time to do the same thing.
Yes,
It's all but doable. It's just,
yes, exactly.
Did you think that it was helpful to them to talk to them frequently?
Yes, by all means. The NADCP came over with their scientist, which is Doug Marlowe, who does all of their evidence-based and all their research. And he had researched in a prior, not the pandemic, but in other instances where there was the loss of communication and face-to-face, and the evidence showed that the more you communicated and the more contact you had with them, the more successful they were.
Good to know.
Have you noticed a change in your revenues with the COVID?
Yes.
Your collection?
Yes. One reason is because of, with the population that we work with, they're not very technologically savvy. And so in that, they were wanting to go to the clerk to pay. And so we had to make arrangements where they could do that at the front of the courthouse, or they could get online. And so when we started back face-to-face, each case manager was told how to show them and help them get on. But yeah, we definitely saw a decrease in, but of course we hear from all of them, oh, I have it, we'll pay when we get it.
any more questions?
How is your facility working out there? How are your premises where you're working from now?
Good. We actually have taken a lot of precautions in meeting face-to-face. We are staggering appointments so that not everybody is in the building at the same time. We have purchased masks. We've also purchased 2 thermometers. We've also purchased sanitizer. And then what we do is we have a double door, so they come in a door and then you can go upstairs to our door. So we have them call the office before they come in. We screen them through CDC recommendation, as in the temperature, and then we ask, have you or somebody you know been sick in the last 2 weeks? And if so, then we tell them that they need to go home and that we will talk to them virtually and that we will reschedule. If they meet the requirements of CDC recommendations, then they're allowed in, and then they are put into the office with their case manager, but they are separated by 8 feet. So it works out well.
Before we let you go, can you state your name
Yes.
and what you do for Karen for the minutes?
Yes, my name is Keith Rogers, and I am the Vigo County Drug Court Coordinator.
Thank you.
And I think I saw you nodding at one point, or several points, actually, in with our last visitor. Are there any resources that you wish you had greater access to, or that represent any gaps in what you have to work with your population?
The population that we work with, and as many as we have, our biggest gap, I would say, is with treatment. And in that, it's because we don't have a lot of treatment providers, and not just that, but the biggest treatment provider we do have is very essential because they can help with recovery works and payments, and they're so broad in their services. But in that, because of the pandemic and everything, the time getting in for assessments and things like that are rather long.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, by all means.
Well, Keith, I don't have any more. I don't have anything else at this time.
All right.
I think you've answered everything.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your efforts. Thank you for
Thank
helping
you.
these people.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right. I believe we have the public defender. Thank you. Oh, goodness. Action. Our session additional review of the recent
American.
past, as you know.
American Airlines.
I thought about it after I got to the office. Coffee? Tea?
I
Don't I
love
look
your
like an
shoes.
airline stewardess?
Oh,
I think they call those
Could I-
flight
yeah, could I
attendants
get a-
now.
Flight, I'm sorry. I have to be political. Flight attendant. Sorry.
It's a term long phone.
To be very. Well. Good afternoon. Do you want me to keep the, what is the, can you hear that mouse on? Do you have a preference?
Your mic on?
It's green,
Okay.
so I'm assuming I'm just speaking softly.
Okay.
Oh, she's working on something else. She just brought me a quarterly report I had to look at.
Okay.
No, sorry. You want me to proceed, or are you reviewing materials?
I'm
Well,
reading
I
Public
see they're
Defender
on
Commission
I
letter.
see they're on your case here to.
Yes, I brought a copy of that. If
Yeah,
anybody
I
else
see that.
wanted to use it as a reference. Can you hear me?
We're just getting a text from IT for, excellent.
Okay, I appreciate that. Makes me aware.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Did we have
For those tuning in, this is Gretchen Etling.
Oh, yes, I'm
Chief-
sorry, I need to
Chief Public
identify myself. I'm
Defender,
Gretchen
yeah.
Etling, I'm the Chief Public Defender for Vigo County. I'm here presenting two budgets, the general budget, and then we also have a supplemental fee budget, in which there are two new additions, that is, the funds in that are generated from public vendor fees that are collected.
All right.
Council President Morris, you want to do the supplemental budget first? It looks a lot more, a little less complex.
Okay.
You want me to address the supplemental?
Supplemental.
If you would,
yeah.
please, yeah.
The supplemental budget, the only additions are for computers, which addresses one of our needs of our office, is that we had Surface Pros that were given to us years ago. IT has informed us that they are hard to fix. Like when they break down, they don't fix them. And so I met with IT, discussed how a plan would be to get our offices, since we never shut down and we were definitely all remote and trying to still navigate this and even went through a trial, we realized the deficiency we had. So not to tax the general budget on that, we put the majority of it in the supplemental, which would not come out of general. But in order to do that, you have to put some line item in general. So we put $1,000 in for one computer. IT told me to budget for 10, is not anticipating that we will even be able to find 10, but he said put it in there. Put in 1,000 would be in the general, and the 9,000 allocation is for 9 other laptops at $1,000 each. But he said at this point they can't even order any. But this is in hope that they'll be able to find some by 2021. The other item additionally is for office chairs. We have not had any office chairs switch in years and years. And I put the majority of that in the supplemental so that we would be able to pay for that out of fees, and then put, I believe it was 2,000 in the general, so that would be supplementing that. And those are the only major changes to the supplemental budget from the year prior, and why you might see some addition in general based on that.
Very creative.
And I did check our balance. I do believe that we have enough, even though the revenues might be down because of the second quarter, we do have a balance in there that would support paying that if we increase the budget in that amount. I think Calista could give you the exact amount, but I think it's, what I was figuring was around 150 if you take out our operating budget this year. I think we've only,
Cash balance right now is 195, 770.
yeah, and I was just subtracting out what we had budgeted for 2020.
195,
Don't touch it.
150.
195.
Yeah, we'll
Considering
have a lot, the
revenue.
trial we just had
Yeah.
has a lot of fees associated with it, so they might be coming down. But that's definitely go down.
So your work at home, your laptops, they need replaced. We can't get them.
We have
Yeah.
Surface Pros, we've actually hired more staff since that Surface Pro, so we're short of Surface Pros as it is. But when we have sent those to IT, and that's why I called them before I prepared my budget, it's my understanding that those they're not an ability to repair those, they're outdated, and they recommended that we gradually update our system with laptops, because the attorneys, we anticipate, with this COVID-19, I think that a lot of the attorneys have become more tech savvy as far as they were a little bit pushed back on it. If there's anything that came out of this as positive, I think that they are realizing that a lot of their work can be done by a laptop. Now, we are restricted on somewhat because we have confidentiality issues of what we can use a laptop for, but for appearing in court and preparing for trials in court, it could be used. We can't use it for a case management system until we find one that doesn't have a third-party administrator that can access it and get our password, because then you could waive confidentiality. But once we get one program that is encrypted and compatible, we've been trying to get with the PD Council, it would also be used for case management systems.
Okay. I think that's where I was starting to get a little confused with the case management with parole, but they have their system and it's all
We do have
secure.
a case management system that we get for free through the Public Defender Council. And we have gone through training, and at every training, I asked them if they could encrypt it so that we would then maintain the privilege. And they say they can't do that. So right now, when we use it, we have to save it as a PDF, encrypt it, and give our assistant the password. It's not as efficient as when you see the state there, because they don't have to worry about that, and they can share notes. And so it can still be used for that. It's just, and a lot of the attorneys still use the case management system, but I've not found one that supports the encryption at this time. If we could find one, we would be able to advance, these computers would even help that even more.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought we talked about this maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, that
Yes.
and keeping your privacy and your yeah. Okay. I just got to get my offices straight.
Yes, so we have the ability to 40 employees, but we're only going for 10. We're just starting slow and trying to gradually get it updated, because we have to start somewhere. And I'm not even sure if we'll be able to get those, but keep our fingers crossed. If we can get them, we would have the funds appropriated to purchase them.
All right. Supplemental. Okay. Any questions about supplemental?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. About our public Public Defender General Fund.
Yes, and the letter does address the additions, some of the additions that we have on that, and that is in the personnel services. That's,
That letter?
yeah, it looks like yours is reduced a little bit, but that's,
Okay.
yeah, basically, it's dated June
All right.
15th from Derek Mason, the staff attorney.
Yep. That's it. All right.
The letter doesn't give any background, but I'm not sure who's familiar with the reimbursement plan that we have. The county to date's received $10 million from the state, but in order to receive the reimbursement, you have to comply with their caseload standards and support guidelines. Last year, we were on the brink when I reported to the committee. I said I might be back here next year asking for additional staff, but they let me count our part-time case manager to get over the requirement to add anybody additional. And unfortunately, or fortunately, how you look at it, we received a dramatic increase in the number of appointments in 2019. We got 90% of the increase. I think I don't know if the prosecutor's been here yet to tell you the number of filings that was dramatically increased in 2019 to 2018. We received the majority of them. Those factor into the reason that I've asked for an increase in malpractice insurance, because they base it on the number of cases you're appointed, and that reflects in the number of support staff you need. And it's actually two positions, because they let me get by to stay in compliance for the year by counting the 2 grant positions, which are not guaranteed next year, because one of them is even through our county. We've been assigned the person through the PD council. I had asked for a social worker when they received the grant to come staff our first appearance courts. And the other one is at the end of their grant period. So I had been treading water and trying to not have to come and ask the council if there would, maybe we would have a decrease in the number of appointments. Instead, it was dramatically increased. So I knew that this would be an issue moving forward, but then they came back and said 2020 first quarter, your numbers are so high that you now have to move 3 of your attorneys to insufficiently staffed until you get the staffing, which means they handle 20% less cases. And right now, on the numbers we just ran, we're at 96%, 92%, 95%, another 95, 96. These are what the attorneys are handling. And even though we didn't get most of the appointments for second quarter, we're going to get slammed now in third quarter when people start showing up for court, because they charged them. They did the probable cause affidavits, but then they said, come back in July, come back in August, and then we'll appoint counsel. So the numbers are going to be hit hard in this quarter, July, August, September, November, December, or the end of the year. And that is, we have the equivalent, our caseload indicates that we need support staff of 12 people, or 12.02, but they gave us 12. They said, even though we take the 2 grant positions, then I told them, take all the misdemeanor cases out. And so they took all the city court misdemeanor cases that are a pure caseload and still discounted the felonies and the ones that are in the county courts, and still, because we were a lot higher when I first got the call. And I had negotiated them down to state compliance. They said, okay, we'll say that you, at this point, just to get through, need 12, but you will not survive, because you actually need an FTE of higher than that to maintain for next year. Which, and Derek said he would answer any questions that you had regarding the FTE and the maintain to stay in compliance in the first part of this, as far as so I took the lowest in paying position to maintain compliance, the legal secretaries, and put them in the budget. That was the lowest paying position that also could provide us assistance in the budget, that projected budget, to maintain compliance.
Another one of those questions that maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. So, public defender gets a caseload. Each one that's, you got any idea how many? I mean, is there a lot of, maybe you could do it just general, is there a lot of people that you're representing 3 or 4 different cases at the same time?
Yes, there's a lot of multiple non-target population, if you want to put it in CR 26 forms, that are people that have multiple cases going at one time. But I think that CR 26 is realizing that the volume of that is increased, so they're trying to combine them. They'll speak to that. But that's a strong part of the population, the non-target. And we have people that need help, people that have dual diagnosis, people that are not getting the treatment that they need. I know I've spoken to several of the council members regarding this, but you're going to continue to have this pattern unless we address the treatment needs for people that don't qualify for problem-solving courts, the people that are reoffending, not getting the treatment that they need. And I feel that if we address that issue, I hope we see our numbers go down then. But that is a lot of people. There's a high rate of recidivism of people that we represent. And it's also generational. I've been doing this for 24 years. I see the children of the people that I've represented when I first became a public defender. And a lot of it is genetic. You know, some of the disorders are genetic. So you see in these problem-solving courts that I participate in that you see family members both in there at the same time too. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but it's.
Well, I think you know what I'm looking for. I'm trying to figure out what we could spend, where we could use our resources to basically decrease your workload.
That's the
Caseload.
one. And it's something that has been a passion of mine, trying to, with the problem-solving courts, but the problem-solving courts only can treat a certain population. There's this whole other population that is not qualifying, or they've run out of their recovery works dollars and they've maxed out, and so they can't get the funds that they need. And if the county would address that population through services or wraparound services, we would see across the board positive impact on the criminal justice system. I feel very strongly about that.
What would that look like? How would that be structured?
Well, I think that it's twofold. I feel we need a intensive, and I talked to Dr. Beck about this also, that when I first had my meeting with him, he says, what's your dream? I said, an intensive treatment program that has full wraparound services, that the people reside there and they get, you know, the service they need for mental health. They see the services they get for their addiction. They get transportation. We have so many people right now that don't have a place to live. That's what we're noticing in most of our first appearance hearing. The common thing is the judge is like, I would let this person out, but they have to have a place to live. Find housing for these individuals. But also, in addition, you've got to have a judicial staff that is fully staffed with professionals that can address these needs also, that they have a go-to person that they can, before they're even appointed to us, that can say, hey, this person doesn't need to be in the jail. We need to get him housing. You know, what do you know? How do you have it? Sometimes there's a lag in that, and they've already been at the jail 3 or 4 days, maybe a week before we can get housing. And that's would be how I would envision it. It's twofold as far as how you have to address the needs. There's a limited population that will qualify for dual diagnosis. There's a whole other population that has just addiction needs or mental health needs, and those people have to be addressed also. And there has to be funding for that. We have a social worker that we were given through the Public Defender Council, and the main reason is because our county has embraced pretrial programming through Bill Watson and the judges, and the council has funded it, has taken this seriously, that pretrial is where you need to get to them quickly. So we have a social worker, but then COVID happened, so we've been trying to do it remotely, and she's been going to court. But the main thing we get is that there's no housing. That's the one thing that people right now won't take people from the jail under certain guidelines, and so they have to be coming in off the street. So those are what we're navigating now. So if we can keep them out of the jail, get them straight into housing, and there won't be those limitations.
What kind of housing can that be?
Well, I think we have the Lighthouse mission right now, and there's something, I think it's maxed out at this point. I think that the housing, there's 2 different housings that you could have. I mean, you've got that work-based treatment housing you could do where they are in the parameters of a DOC program, or you could have, fund other agencies out there that need additional money for beds and support them. Or the housing might be there, but we just don't have anybody that's on a constant basis looking for beds. And that the judges would have somebody that, one of the directives that I gave to the case managers through the PD council is contact every facility, ask how many beds they have, how many people are on the waiting list, get me that list. And that would be something that a person could do also for the judges. Always know what availability is around for housing.
How many people are you talking about?
How many people are we talking about that would need housing? Oh, well, since this happened, I've probably received 30 calls since, I would say, May, of people that don't have housing.
Okay, would a housing for 30 be adequate?
Housing for 30 would be a start. I think that our population is untapped. I think that those are the people I'm notified of. I mean, we represent thousands of people. I mean, I think a lot of them do have housing. A lot of them wouldn't probably accept the housing. Some of them would not. They have their own situation. But I would say 30 would be a great start.
Would 50 be realistic?
50 would be more realistic to start.
Would 75 be more realistic?
100 would actually be more realistic if you could get housing for 100. I think that you would see it
Would you have to have, you'd have to have like sleeping and bathing and feeding?
The food would have to be supplemented. I don't know if there would be the provisions through the county to do that through the sheriff's department that they've done through other programs, or if that would be contracted out. You would have to have the ability as if that's where they were residing. So bathing needs would have to be, and sleeping. And then you would have the biggest thing, which I think was addressed earlier in another meeting, was jobs. It's like trying to find jobs, placing these people in training. This housing would include training, that they would be able to go out back into transition into the community, into a position that would keep them from falling back into the habits of not going to their appointments, and then supporting their mental illness and self-medicating through addiction, and then they end up back into our court system. And that is the biggest need, and I've realized it for years, but the problem is I know addressing it, but if the county is willing to embrace it, I think housing with wraparound services and job placement and training and transportation is a big one also. You know, a lot of our clients don't have electronic means to go out and job search. And we've noticed even when the courts are asking them to appear remotely, they're waiting in parking lots and coming in our office because they don't have the ability or cell phone minutes to appear remotely. And they might have it at the beginning of the month, but they don't. Their court date happens to fall at the end.
What generated their circumstances?
Well, as I think, no fault of their own. I mean, I feel that a lot of our population is people that have mental illness. As Virgil has testified before, he did a survey and over 70% of the people that were in the jail had already had an open file at the Hamilton Center. Everyone that comes in our office is evaluated for recovery works. The majority of them have mental health or addiction and qualify for services. The only reason they might not qualify is if they're facing a misdemeanor or they live out of state, but the majority of them do. So it's the people that in our population, the majority of them, they're suffering from a secondary diagnosis and primary diagnosis that leads them to be accused of crimes.
So they needed help earlier in their life.
Intervention. Our numbers have increased, just keep increasing. And the number, and it's not just the ones that are appointed to our office, the number of filings by the police have increased. Of course, then that is going to be in turn our office numbers increase. But it's not that you have the same population of people being arrested and we're just getting more appointments. You've got an increase in the number of the people that are getting charged with crimes. And so then we are also getting an increase in the numbers.
Why are they charging them more people now?
Well, the majority has been the drug cases, and Rob Roberts actually has a spreadsheet he had shared with a committee, the Citizens, and I can't remember that's a long name. I can never remember the name of the
Vigo
committee that the
County Criminal
commissioners.
Justice Coordinating Council.
There it is, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, that showed a dramatic increase in the number of domestic filings and the number of drug cases that have dramatically increased. And both of those general categories of crime, a lot of times you have people that have a mental illness and they are self-medicating through addiction, and so they get the drug charges, or that leads to domestic violence in a close-knit family situation.
I'm sure there's more examples of communities that are in our same situation rather than communities that are lowering the recidivism.
Yes, I think that it is nationally and statewide recognized that to have a treatment-based pretrial program is the future, is what we need to address the needs. And
Is
this
there-
is it. Problem-solving courts do it, and they were applauded a couple of years ago. And I, 10 years ago, started one with the prosecutor, and 15 years ago, we started one. But it's a very targeted population that gets into a problem-solving court. And if you continue to reoffend, you're not going to fit within the parameters of that problem-solving court. So what do you do with that population? You got to do something. You've got to address it. And eventually, what was it, 50% recidivism drug court? What about that other 50? They're going back into the court system, and they've got to get treatment. And it all leads to an increase in numbers, which leads to an increase in our appointments, which leads to an increase in our FTE staff that we need, which leads to a letter from the commission, which leads me to here to addressing you that I need more funds now to support our office, and a long-term project. We hope we don't have to come back again if we can fund other programs that will address the needs of our clientele.
Is there a county that you've been impressed with, a community that you've seen do something not normal that we could look into?
So far, Vigo County in our pretrial, I have to say that we are ahead of the game, and I believe when we had the audit done, they were impressed by the number of problem-solving courts we had. I mean,
But to tie Chris's questions together and your answers, who has the wraparound services, that kind of, have you seen anybody that's
I
got
believe
the
that,
housing and the
well,
wraparound services?
Grant County had it at one point, and Marion was trying to wrap around services, treatment base. Yeah, but there haven't been a lot. I think that this is a need they're addressing. It's like when everyone was talking about the opiate grants. It was the talk. And I actually went to the legislature and pulled out one of the representatives who was behind Recovery Works and said, you're addressing the needs as meth in our county. It's not opiates. But it was the flavor of, that was what they were identifying, but it didn't help our county. We have to start somewhere. Our county would embrace it, realizing that meth, and it's the number of meth arrests that have increased dramatically, is identifying our needs. Grant might have different needs that they're addressing, but for our needs, it's to get people and services from meth. I mean, we had a Vivitrol program, we have a methadone clinic, we've addressed those. Now we have the medically assisted treatment that is addressing any opiate needs we have. The majority of people that are involved with opiates don't fall into the criminal justice system. It's the people that have meth issues. So Grant might have had an issue with opiates, and they addressed it through the grants that were offered by the state. We haven't had any state funding to help assist our counties with the increase in the meth.
Well,
But
Gretchen, let's back it up. Back it up into the future. What can we start now that will stop this in the future?
yeah, we have to start.
What,
It's got to start.
At what age can we prevent these problems for the future?
Well, I think
How
even-
young?
Well, juvenile court's starting with drug court. I think they're embracing starting a drug court, that program. I think that it's never too young to start. And I'm sure that Norm Loudon would come here and speak and tell you that he could use all sorts of assistance
Well,
with getting
he
services.
was here and he did. He
Yeah,
did.
with-
It was very impressive.
Yeah, with their program. I've met with him regarding trying to find out services we need better over there at the detention. I think it starts young. Like I said, I've seen fathers, brothers, sisters. I've been around long enough now that I've seen that it's fathers and sons, mothers and daughters.
And I've been around long enough, and it's grandchildren.
It's grandchildren. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. We've never had anything like this, that we could address all the needs. We've had different courts try to address it and through different programs and different problem solving, but we've never taken the commitment to fund the county a treatment-based facility and program and the judicial staff with the tools to identify the people that need to be in that treatment-based program. And if they don't qualify, other funds and or housing or transportation or other services available. And I think if we address that, we will stop seeing people like me coming back and asking for additional funds to respond to the problem we're already in and addressing something that's already occurred. I already had to move my attorneys to insufficiently staffed to address the dramatic increase in cases. So unless I get the funds, we'll be out of compliance. But if I don't get the funds or the positions, we'll be out of compliance. But if I don't get them by the end of the year, I'll have to move all the attorneys to be insufficiently staffed. They have to handle a 20% caseload, and we can't do that because we continue to get more cases.
Bill, are you here to address the courts?
We would
At three.
welcome it. I would welcome it.
Can you hold on a minute and we can maybe talk to the juvenile court for a little while? Can you stay or not?
Can I stay?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then any more questions
Can I
for
ask
public
one
defender?
more question?
Well, sure.
Or kind of a thought, and it may be the most unpopular thought. Okay.
Yes.
Yesterday we were talking about a certain organization that gets a lot of money locally, that is supposed to help with alleviating that first-time offender that's meth or whatever. So let's just say somebody comes in, they're arrested for the first or second time, and now they're getting released on their own recognizance. This organization, I don't know how it works, so I guess I'm stupid to this, or not stupid, but I'm just not informed. But do they get released into or provided info about what the Hamilton Center offers, or are they put into, I guess, are they given a chance to be welcomed into a program that will help them? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean,
so no, it's not. It's an excellent question because I think it's good that you ask the questions because someone appears in court, we have a first appearance attorneys there, and then I will get an email from the first appearance attorney saying this person needs housing, this person needs to get to the Hamilton Center, we need to set something up, we need to have Virgil Mackey go see this person at the jail. So then we have Steve Bell, who's our case manager. He then evaluates them for Recovery Works. That Recovery Works paperwork is sent to the facility that you're referring to because they are the gatekeeper, if you will, for Recovery Works for our county. Then they will feel if they address their needs, then they'll schedule an appointment for them to show up. And
so who keeps track of the gatekeeper?
the gatekeeper, as far as, well, the attorney then would be assigned the case, and then the attorney and paralegal would address whether or not they're completing their counseling and have contact with the Hamilton Center to get reports. Steve Bell also keeps the totals on how many people show up for their assessments, how many people are in treatment, and he keeps those numbers also. We then have the social worker who just started, who is supposed to be keeping updates if they're receiving the treatment that they need, if they're going to the appointments that they need, or if the appointments are even a possibility, if there's any availability, because it was at a policy at one point, if you missed your first appointment, then you had to do a walk-in on Tuesdays to try to get an appointment. I don't know if that's still a policy, but I do know that they worked with that. It is still the policy. I do know that when we contacted this facility back when we've heard of that, they did give us a Wednesday, so our people that missed appointments could come in and make appointments on Wednesday. So they did work with us when we addressed that need.
I guess personally for me, this is not a statement on behalf of anybody here but myself. They could be doing more. And that's not because, I don't know how to say this without sounding condescending or anything, but there are so many other organizations in our community that are clearly stepping up, that lack the funding, that lack the ability to participate in individuals, or maybe not, the individual that's arrested on whatever drug charge doesn't even know about this organization, and maybe they're pointed to a place where they could be pointed somewhere else and maybe receive a different type of help, or
Which I think brings us back around to the fact that when we were meeting and trying to get, I think they call it now a deflection center is the term that you're supposed to use. We need that right now. But that's
Right.
a separate building, separate structure, separate plan. We need something that's more immediate. And I think if we can get a treatment-based work release program that addresses those needs, we don't have to have a third party relied on, and we can handle it ourselves and fund it, staff it. And I think that addresses any concerns you might have on it.
All right, could,
Yes, I
Can
will,
you
I will
stay
back
with
up,
it and
let
I
the
can-
others go.
and we're gonna get with courts here in a minute, and Juvenile can present, and I'm sorry about your time, but Juvenile Court, please.
I have 6 copies of what I'm presenting.
Okay,
Do I pass those out to this?
sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dewey.
This juvenile budget travel expense.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deb Kessler from the Vigo County Juvenile Center. I'm the Chief Juvenile Probation Officer, and I am here today requesting that $6,000 be added to our juvenile court budget for the travel expense line item for the purpose of our training. In the handout I gave you was my letter, and then the certification from the Indiana Court Services that require probation officers to have 12 hours of training every year, and 6 of those hours have to be with evidence-based programming. We have 2 conferences every year. One is held in Indianapolis in the spring, the other is held most recent years in French Lick in the fall. With those 2 conferences, they're specific. Indianapolis is court services. French Lick is specific to probation officers in Indiana. We would be able to take care of those training hours, evidence-based and otherwise, with those 2 conferences that we would be able to attend should we receive the additional funds. Real quick, Deb, is that a travel expense line? Oh. Are there questions?
Sound like you need it.
Well, we do.
These are required training for them by the state, their training hours. They really have no choice about it. They really don't.
Yep.
So really, that's it?
Yeah,
Yep.
that's all you need?
That's an open-ended question, but for today, yes, this is all we need.
Is there another, just for form's sake, is there another less expensive way to get that training?
2 years ago, I attempted to do that. We were unsuccessful because we didn't have any money to go to either conferences. And so I tried to find training around the area that we could do for free. That's what we had to do. I could not find the 6 evidence-based hours we did not cover. They have to be specific to that. It has to be branded as that. And we failed to be in compliance in 2018. So I did try to do that, yes.
Okay, Deborah, this is your 38th year.
It will be in January of next
Oh
year,
my
yes.
gosh,
Wow.
whoa.
I started when I was in middle school, so.
She did not know Francis Vigo personally.
Thank you for that, yes. I did not know.
I don't know how you can work in county government that long.
I have my days, but I do love my job, and I'm very proud to be a county employee, always have been.
Awesome.
And you've always been a good one, may I say.
Thank you. I've always tried.
Well, I guess on my part, your presentations and your department seem to run well, and your presentations are always excellent. So that's I guess that's all we need of you right now.
I'm sorry, may
All
I
right.
ask?
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry,
Questions?
No, it just came to mind. Hearing the conversation we just had, I think we just had it, about how do we start? I think this was Councilwoman Weger's question. How do we start earlier? What can we do earlier to keep problems from becoming perhaps or continuing to be generational? Is there anything else that you can think of that is a gap, that is an add, that would help to address things in this environment so that they don't continue to the future?
Well,
Anything that we're not doing today?
I will say that's kind of been my mantra for years and years and years once I kind of started seeing how everything worked in our county. And I will say in the last recent years, things have changed, both state and local, working with the juveniles. If you start on the front end, the back end's going to get lighter. The drug court was mentioned. And we, until COVID, we were working hard and putting a drug court together. And since COVID, and our prosecutor just had her third child, about 3 weeks ago, she is coming back. She emailed me today. She sits and she also does the other problem-solving court, Cynthia Fisher. So she's coming back to work, and I have invited Raintree Services to be our therapy for the drug court. I have a probation officer named Jenny Fouts who is going to be the individual she's very interested in, and she's the one I normally send our hardcore kids that are using drugs to. She's going to be our point. Angie Grogan is going to be our public defender who's going to sit on the team as well. And so I'm going to begin, hopefully, setting up some meetings again, putting together a drug court. And I am still very hopeful by the first of the year that we will be up and running with our first set of 20 kids for drug court. Our judge is very supportive and excited. It will be an evening court for which he doesn't have a problem with. So that's kind of where we are with the drug court. I will reiterate, meth is the drug. We have kids that use meth. We test for meth. They test positive for meth. And so that is the problem here in the county. So the drug court, the state of Indiana allowed 10 years ago, they opened up DCS monies for us to be able to do placements without asking permission from DCS. We can now do plug-in services, and we have agencies that we refer to for case management and therapy. Those are all good things, but I would say the vast majority of our kids that are on probation or pending probation, because we can put services in while pending, which is different than it used to be. They have case management, they'll have therapy, we bring them in for drug screens, we have them do home-based drug screens, and so that's also very positive for the kids that we deal with.
So no capacity restrictions that limit you from doing more of the good things that you're doing?
So far, no. No. DCS has not come in and said, you don't have any more money, so we are able to do those things. And I believe that we've got some, and home-based services are big now. And instead of a child having to go to Hamilton Center, therapists and case manager come to that child's home. So they can't use the excuse of I didn't have a ride. You know. car wouldn't start, got impounded, no insurance, all the things that you've heard prior. They come to the home and take care of business. And there are 3 or 4 agencies within the community that we use for that purpose.
Thank you.
Did you ever get your car?
Yes, the commissioners gave us a car that had been sitting on the lot about 3 years. It had a bird nest in the engine, that's why it wouldn't start. And the garage fixed it all up. Bill had attended a commissioners meeting, and we got that in August, and we are thrilled. So,
Go wear it out. We'll get another one.
oh, okay. Well, we're taking very good care of it. It only has about 62,000 miles on it, so far so good. Thank you for asking.
That's all.
All right, thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
We're here for the fourth ceremony. Division 3, June Jackson's probate commissioner. Jill Bree is head of our IT, and Bill Watson, community corrections, but also director of pretrial service.
Okay, thank you.
June's going to give you copies of our budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The courts, in the last year or so, have undergone some changes. Last year, we were here and made some structural changes to probation, adult probation, and pretrial services. Also, the proliferation at the beginning of Rule 26, which let Mr. Watson talk about today. But then the pandemic hit, and we had to make some pretty significant changes quickly, meaning we had to move to video. Joe did a pretty good job getting a video of all the courts, and we all were able to use our Cisco WebEx, use video conferencing for just about all of our hearings. And so our transition plan is in effect, and we're back slowly allowing the public to courts at a pretty small rate. We successfully put to jury, I did, Judge Roach did, at West Vigo Conference Center, social distancing with masks, and it went really well. We had, out of the 75 jurors we called, like 4. Everybody but 4 showed up, which is almost better than when we have them summoned to the courthouse. So the only thing I have to do is people may might get out of house, I don't know. Anyway, so we were able to do that. We picked 2 separate locations to pick juries. West Vigo Conference Center, the middle school, elementary school, and then McLean. When school starts, we're going to have to look for other places to pick our juries. So we're in the process of doing that. We've communicated with Ms. Miller about funds or emergency funds. I mean, we may have to pay for things to use those spaces. MCL, the conference center there, we're operating interference. Girl Scouts, the fairgrounds, we'll look just about everywhere.
National Guard Armory.
Vibrato, Wayne Newton.
Oh, pretty much every place that has a large.
I called ISU, I called everywhere, trying to find a place where we could call 75 or 150 jurors. So we're in the process of doing that. The budget that we proposed, yes, we are asking for another pretrial officer, although I think it's,
Yes.
although it's a court system. So I'm going to let Bill talk a little bit about the pretrial service officer that we asked.
Currently, there's a request for program certification. I have a meeting with Office of Court Services next week about that. That is required of us in order to continue to be able to submit the grant application. Have to have a certified program, just like the problem-solving course. It's basically treated as a problem-solving course. That program will be at that point. So I have no concerns about us being able to reach certification for that. The numbers in the program have been very good, much higher than we probably anticipated, even with the COVID. You know, there's there's approximately 400 people in the pretrial program right now. Those people that the courts are getting out are averaging a stay of 1.5 to 2 days in jail. That's really quick. The pretrial screeners, we have 3. They're working 7 days a week now to do the screen. to make sure that when those people appear in court on their next day, that the courts have the screening instrument, the results of that, to give them good, solid information about the person they're looking at and whether or not they're appropriate for someone to be released without bond. Once they're released, they're coming over, and based on their levels of supervision in pretrial, there's certain things, requirements we have of them. But with the growth of the program, and when I say growth, we have a target population group that the courts look at that are automatically eligible for this. However, the judges are also using it now to release people pretrial that are not part of a target population, to get them out of jail. These are other people that they're identifying that as well could come out on pretrial without a bond. So as we expand that program for certification, the need is there for another person. I think I made the comment this morning. Right now, city court is an example. If you have a pending city court case, you're not eligible for pretrial release. The judges.
Under the way we wrote our previous.
Yes.
Target population.
The judges are now looking at, as well as the prosecutor, realizing that we're excluding some people that probably could be released from jail for no other reason than they have a pending city court case. And we knew this as the program started. We knew there would be tweaks and changes. With it being brand new, we were going to find things along the way that we needed to do differently. Just bringing those people in right now would bring in 80 to 100 more people in that pretrial program and make them eligible for it that are not getting in it right now. So quickly, our numbers could go from 400 to 500 at that. And we're trying to manage that with 3 people, which is really, really becoming a significant challenge at this point, and to do it effectively. And if that population would increase with other offense types beyond just the city court, then that number could grow exponentially.
So you're talking about the city court case is additional to what they have in the county?
So they may be appear in certain Division 3 on a level 6 felony, but because they have another case pending,
Gotcha.
they don't fall within our target population, and then they're not part of the pretrial screen.
Yes.
So if we change our target population, we could include.
Okay.
And what's between now and y'all being able to do that?
I think we just need to, with COVID, we haven't had a lot of the question of getting our data, getting our group together, have a meeting and make a decision about whether or not we want to expand our.
Yeah, we were set.
We've had some discussions about that already.
Yes, informally, I've talked with the judge about it, and primarily Judge Roach and Judge Mulligan. But our meeting that we had set obviously got sidetracked, blasted right out of the way. So we've continued, and I've kind of kept Judge Mulligan and Judge Roach up to date on some of the things that we've talked about or they've seen, and the pretrial screeners are making they basically have a continual log that's probably as long as this tabletop now, and I'm not kidding, of things that we need to address that we've seen about the program already, that, hey, we need to look at this, or we need to take a look at that, or maybe we should look at this population. So, I mean, we're kind of analyzing ourselves along the way, and we really are not even looking at it with the full bus yet.
And I think just to, the people, it's not reduce our jail population as we include, but people who, not a lot of failure to appear rate.
No.
People are appearing for court, and I think they suggested not being. So.
No, the number of arrests are very low, re-arrests are extremely low, and as we explained this morning, I think part of the failure to appear rate is just going from when they're sentenced in court and released to coming over to the pretrial screeners and signing up. A lot of that has been related to, again, COVID-related issues. The building's being closed, the courts release someone and say report to pretrial immediately. They come over, they can't get in because security may say, look, buildings are closed, if you don't have an appointment, you can't come in. They send that person away. Well, unfortunately, with our population, if the deputy sheriff said, I don't have to go, that's good enough, so they never come back again. Well, then we're notifying the court that they never reported to sign up. So then the courts are bringing them back in. That is the biggest problem we've had. And I'm not going to say some of us offenders choosing not to go, but sometimes I don't really believe it's all their fault because the judges are hearing this as well. Well, I went over there and they wouldn't let me in. Well, we know that does happen. So.
And I'm sorry, who are they seeing when they try to go over to the jail? And is that where the pretrial? No.
The community corrections.
But the
Okay.
sheriff has security on that building, and he runs it like the courthouse. So when they show up, that officer is saying, county buildings are closed unless you have an appointment to do business. Well, I was told to come over here by the court. Well, if you don't have an appointment, you can't come in.
So it might be some miscommunication.
Yeah, some of
Yeah,
that
okay.
happens. And it's no one's fault. It's not the sheriff's fault. And in some cases, it's not the offender's fault. They tried, but if the deputy said go away, that's good enough for them. They're not gonna come back.
But apart from that problem, I think I thought you were on the path of saying that to go from court directly over to the pretrial screener to make that first contact
Mm-hmm.
is helping with the failure to
Yes.
appear.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so there's that one thing that happens sometimes.
Yes.
But generally making
Yes.
that connection to go right over
That
to the
immediate-
screeners is helping with the FTA.
Yes,
kind of-
it's that immediate contact, getting them with someone right away versus, well, I'll get to it tomorrow and the next day. Well, then the state, that's what I mean. So yeah, that immediate contact has helped significantly.
You've got them hooked up with the communications and everything then, right?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, there's a lot of aspects that we've done differently this year. I mean, we are still working on trying to improve the video at the jail so that we can get more things done with less entrance or exit into the jail. At the same time, with the trial that we just did, we also streamed that to the state webpage live, which I don't know if we were the first court in Indiana, if not first 5 to ever do a trial, much less stream it to the internet since COVID has started.
Wow.
Like Indiana's just, there's not really any trials taking place where we're not gonna wait. We really can't. Some of these people have been sitting in jail for a long time and deserve their day in court, so
Yeah.
we've had to,
So the real question was, how do we allow the public to see it?
and the best way that we could think of was not let them in the courtroom, because we just don't have space. When you have 14 members of jury 6 feet apart, it pretty much takes up the entire court. And so our best idea was to stream it.
To leave all the jurors in the gallery so that it's spread out, all
Yeah.
12 or 15 of them. So the public wasn't allowed, but we could live stream it so they had access to it. Could actually go to the state website and see the trial. Kind of neat.
Kind of neat.
The other
It's
thing,
fabulous.
we've had to do is, because we don't want anybody getting around the public jury member within 6 feet, we've had to go 100% digital evidence provided on TV sets. So we've got more TVs that are floating between courts at the moment. Part of the stuff that we had actually had in our hardware budget is to increase the amount of hardware we have. Because right now, if Division I has a trial, they have most of the evidence equipment and the streaming equipment. We only have one other court that we can do. And so we're shifting equipment every week. I mean, I'm literally installing and uninstalling equipment.
Did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sir.
How does streaming the trials live reconcile with the prohibition of having cameras and
How'd you
press
control
in
the
there?
signals, what
And-
he's saying?
Well, the TV station, TV crews
Keep
and
the
stuff are
cameras out of the
prevented from-
courtroom.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
the state set up a web page, and that's where we
Mhm.
stream to. We don't stream to YouTube like you guys do out here. We don't record anything. The state's website
You sent the
does not
signal
record.
to a spot.
We do. We send it to a spot that the actual state Supreme Court set up for us, as well as other counties to stream to. In doing so, because you can't really record right now in the state of Indiana, you can't have a recorded video device
yeah,
in a
that's what I
courtroom.
was talking about. How do you reconcile not being able to have a camera or,
So we have the camera in a courtroom. The difference is the camera has no ability to record on its own. The laptop that it's plugged into has no ability to record on its own. At the same time, I can't prevent the public from going to the web page and record it on their phone or anything like that. I mean, there's just nothing I can do about that, but this is what the state Supreme Court provided us to do.
But they didn't know it was coming down. They'll eventually
Correct. This has
catch
all
on.
been very much so on the fly.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
kind of, there's no playbook for this, so we had, we don't know, a live stream is gonna be sufficient for
Yeah.
all the public access to. And
That's
when we're
great.
using video, they have the ability to phone in, we give them the number and say, well, okay, Superior Court Division 3, this is the number, and they could listen and use their phone and listen.
That's,
So they have
that's
access that way.
wonderful.
So
That is
if the jail's
terrific.
appearing, then everyone's on video, and the public witnesses or whatever, by video.
And Bill, did you provide the popcorn?
Well,
He
they
did
didn't
not.
ask for any.
He did
so-
not.
Did not. That
Uh,
is really innovative. That
We-
is so excellent.
Well, we did test something in Division 2 today. We actually had a couple of people who were in hotspot areas, with one specifically in Hawaii right now. She still had to testify, and so in Division 2, as we speak right now, they're having a hearing, which we're not streaming this one to the internet, but we have a Zoom broadcast on a 65-inch TV set in that courtroom. The judge is able to see and hear everything that's being testified. The attorneys are actually in the room, and we actually provided evidence on it so that they could testify to it without ever leaving Hawaii, so that we could still have our hearings, conduct court, not get behind, but not have these people coming into the building from hotspot areas.
This may permit the Indiana judges, Supreme Court, to realize that it's time
To move
to
forward,
move forward.
I agree completely.
At
I
least
think
into
that,
the 20th century.
yeah, I mean, the fact that they allowed us to have a camera in there to actually
Big
stream is
step.
unprecedented.
It's fabulous.
The fact that we're streaming some of it to the internet is completely unprecedented. I mean,
Is it ever?
there are a lot of things that we've done just in the last month that
You
we'd
were-
have never
you were-
thought of
That was
6
so
months ago.
innovative on your part to be able to get that done.
I was just given a problem and told to come up with a solution.
We're gonna have a guilty plea with the Department of Corrections on Friday.
Yeah.
I assume. So.
In which case, we are not bringing him from Plainfield. We're actually doing
Think of the
100%
money
of it
that
by Zoom.
saves.
Well, it does, and with COVID, then they don't have to transfer back to the jail, then to quarantine for 14 days. So-
Great. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
So the change in our budget, that we're requesting,
A lot of it has to do with just increase, because we've kind of had to piece this together. We did not budget for this last year, obviously. Who really prepared for this? Everybody's budget's taken a huge hit. We've spent probably more than we've ever spent in the first quarter this year. It's just been one of those years, and so I do believe that we had a slight increase. It wasn't very major at all. And really what it's for is to, right now, I'd say half my week is either preparing for remote jury selection, installing hardware, uninstalling it, taking it somewhere else, reinstalling it, or the streaming stuff for the trials. During that trial, there was one day I was here at 6:30 in the morning to make sure things were set up and ready to go because we just don't have enough time in the day. It would be nice if we had these statically set up, now that the state's allowing us to do it, to actually statically set them up in a courtroom that was never designed for it. And so,
You know, the CARES Fund may pay for this.
well, I think I asked, we were told to spend money and then you guys would seek
Try to get it
reimbursement,
back,
Right.
yeah.
seek reimbursement.
and so at the moment, this is assuming that nothing happens. Even our increase is very, very $3,000. So this whole COVID thing has changed our budget hardware and software-wise only $3,000.
But when you do submit that, put,
COVID.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, and I've made sure to mark all my invoices that I give to June that have had to
And he
do with this
works,
COVID
and
problem.
he works cheap.
Yeah, but $3,000 for a change for the amount
Pretty-
of change we've had to
pretty
do,
cheap,
really,
yeah.
we've tried to cut every cost we could, considering we've not outsourced any of this to another company. I did get a quote the other day to actually do the same setup that I did in Judge Reddy's court, and I've done it for, it would take about $1,000. I think it was $20,000 for all 6 courts.
Sure.
And so,
would we pay for the transport from the Department of Corrections to our court? Would we
Or
pay
the
for that?
sheriff usually transports
Okay,
whatever.
So-
and so you're looking at 2 people probably for that transport, depending on what the defendant's charged with or in the DOC facility for it. There could be more, plus gas, time, money.
yeah.
And
And
that's round trip, that's here and back.
Correct. And so I think just setting up one courtroom for $1,000 almost covers.
Was this case handled by the public defender?
Public defense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
On Friday.
okay.
So really 3,500 for the change in our IT budget. And June, what's the big increase for us? The increase?
Well, we requested 5,000 for office supplies, for extra like COVID things I've been purchasing. Physician fees, we requested another 5,000. Mental health evaluations are paid out of that. That continues to increase. supplemental to work release, we requested $75,000 additional, because we have multiple defendants.
And this year, we used quite a bit of our indigent work pension funds because we worked to home detention and during COVID, people lost their jobs.
That was the fund.
Quit work with that money.
Yeah, it did, but that was the fund that saved thousands, because if we had not been able to pay for the home detention for those people that couldn't pay for it, they would have went back into jail or to out-of-county placement, because community corrections cannot afford that kind of hit for home detention costs. There's just no way. So that money would have basically a godsend for keeping those people in their homes, with the county not paying somewhere else. It was a whole lot cheaper versus you pay for that $100, $105, $110 a week. If you send them out of county, what is it now? 35, Cheryl? 45? What are they? 35. I mean, you're looking at $35 a day, and we're keeping them there in their house. And the courts placed all those people like that were unemployed during that time period. They placed them in a lockdown situation where they couldn't go anywhere except a medical emergency. And our numbers of violations during that time period were significantly low, very low. The home detention people, or the work release that came out into the home detention program, I probably to date could count their number of violations on one hand as far as serious violations. They just didn't violate. They stayed home. When they were told to stay there, they stayed there.
So we've had some increases in
Lodging and food.
lodging and foods. One of the things, because we bring our jurors back to the courtroom and we don't want them to leave and go back out to the community to have lunch, we've been paying for lunch. And some other mileage, I guess.
Right, a little bit more mild, but
Due to the
we
remote
normally,
location of picking
we
up
only
their-
purchase their lunch when they're
When
deliberating.
they're deliberating.
And
maybe
now,
one at a time.
every day, we're buying meals, 14, 16,
So that would be an increase of cost, we just increase that. We just don't know how long this is gonna last. Could go through the end of the year, until I suppose there's a vaccine. So, and which brings the increase in the mental health evaluations really brings me to my final request, which is my big request. I think it dovetails into what Bill's trying to create affordability. We have many people who enter the jail who are mentally ill or suffering have substance abuse disorder. And our request is for a contract employee for a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Currently, the jail has nurses and they have a medical doctor. They don't have any psychiatrists over there. So what we've had to do is have psychiatrists in Indianapolis, we transport them over there for a psychiatric evaluation at $300 an hour. Very, and it's difficult for defendants who are seriously mentally ill in jail to receive any kind of psychiatric. It's been a real difficult time. So if someone's suffering from a mental health illness when they have a case that's pending, it's difficult to move forward. It's difficult for the public defender to do anything, to assist counsel. It's difficult for us to do anything. So we're asking for some money to hire our own nurse practitioner for all reports to be sent over to the jail to treat people who report have a serious mental health problem, to medicate them, to make recommendations to the court about treatment. And it will also help stabilize individuals in the jail and process them out quickly.
So that'll happen pre-trial, that evaluation?
Judge Mulliken, is this the person that keeps a person from having to wait 5 or 6 weeks for an assessment appointment, or is that one of these other services?
I think it could be
It
both.
almost-
They could do assessments, but also progressive social therapy.
Okay.
But I think it'll make it our jobs a lot easier to get someone over there to help them get medication, to stabilize them, make better decisions. And of course, I know that there's a workers dual diagnosis program, which I think that's helped our class.
That's listed under contractual services.
I think I amended the budget. Yeah. I think it's a pretty significant, it's a whole difficult time treating seriously mentally ill. It's no knock on the jail. I get along very well with the jail nurses and their mental health or their medical doctor. But it's really a question of something. I know, all of the courts can eyeball people and know that they're they are struggling. Nice to call a practitioner. So that's part of our request. Second request is a request to actually have a staff person who would be on staff, social worker, a therapist. And the purpose would be, I guess, twofold. One, Vigo County has several problem-solving courts. I have a family recovery court which targets the child and youth services cases, which are civil, but welfare. Judge Roach has Veterans Court. Judge Lewis does the adult mental health, and Judge Rader currently has the drug. And you know, just to give you an idea, the rate of recidivism for the problem-solving courts is pretty low. I mean, or I guess pretty high. Our success rate is 60, 70, 80%. And I think, you know, it's evidence-based practices. It's a better outcome in many ways than some. So we're actually addressing the cause of reasons for crime, reducing the rate of recidivism. So this, you know, I've heard the stories. I know what will say when they've finished up problem solving or graduated from their program. And you know, I believe in evidence-based practice and the model of problem solving. So a therapist or social worker would help us identify those people quickly for problem solving, to make sure that it's open for everyone. It's the best of the criminal justice system to make sure that everybody. The other thing is, I think it would help our nurse practitioner to evaluate people, assess people quickly. One of the biggest problems for us is meaningful access to treatment. You know, somebody may be in the Vigo County Jail, they're for pretrial services, and then they may make an appointment in 30 days, or that they don't have a ride to get there, or that appointment's canceled for whatever reason, and then it's 6 weeks, it's 6 months, and they're have yet to have any kind of treatment. I think getting someone over there to assess people quickly, make recommendations, really be a big value. So those are our requests. If you have any questions.
Your $50,000 contractual request, would they only come based on the needs of what you see, or would that be like an hourly every day?
The idea would be an hourly nurse practitioner. So whatever, you know, whether it's a certain amount of hours per month, week,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Do you think that'll be enough?
You know, I think I used figures from a psychiatrist, kind of a general, I don't have it in front of me, 40 hours a week at a certain amount of hourly rate would get about $4,000 a month. And I wrote as a contractual employee because I think that's easier.
Oh, I
Nurse
agree.
practitioner has to work under a psychiatrist, that way they may have another job or something.
Well, this may be a stretch to say, but I would say 70% of the people that come into our jail probably need that psychiatric evaluation. So,
Plus this council.
Well, I was just gonna send this over to your problem-solving card so you could figure out how to practice it.
There you go. But, how is that nurse practitioner summoned?
Well, I mean, you know, I think it would be just a referral, or, you know, they could come, honestly, an officer from jail.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean,
You know, I just, I don't have any specific, I think they have to be certain hours.
maybe the arresting officer might evaluate and
It
say,
might
"Boy,
be
you-
that they're over at jail regularly, or referrals, specific order.
I think for me personally, this is the most frustrating budget because I want to give you so much.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
you know,
By the same token, you know, we did pass a tax to be able to deal with problems that we've never been able to deal with before. And this is exactly, you know, why I just felt so passionately about it. We put this stuff off long enough, and we have to step up and do it.
Well,
You know,
you know,
we've let people down over and over and over, and we can't do it anymore.
Well, you know, the problem-solving course really relied on grants. My court is paid entirely on a grant. Veterans Court uses the SAMHSA grant, some other grants.
And how many
I don't
times,
know how
how
really
many
it's a
times,
volunteer
Judge,
program.
how many times did we say to you, you know, when that grant runs out, we can't pay you, we can't pick it up, we can't do it, and that's no way to run a community. We have to be able to pay for the things that people in this community need. And if we all put a little bit into the pot, we can make this community better. That's what we should be doing, and that's what, in a little bigger way this time, we'll be able to do it. We'll be able to do some of these things.
I mean, for a county our size, to have full problem solving.
That's really wonderful. That's what we should be spending money on.
What the courts are trying to do, if I may, is a great idea to lead into what I've talked to people about, because so many of the people that Judge Mulligan is talking about are that dual diagnosis population that continually circulates in our court system. Court system, jail, probation, community correction, they hang out there for a while and they go back to jail.
Right.
They hang out there for a while and then they go back to the court. And the court tries to put them back somewhere and they come back again. And
Bill,
that cycle continues till they do something bad enough that the court finally says, look, I gotta send this person to prison. We can't keep taking this chance anymore. And identifying them in the jail, getting them started with what they need in the jail, and then coming over to our programs where we know who these people are, plugging them into what we want to start there, is a continuity or a continuation of what was began or started in the jail. And we're not trying to catch up with it when they get there and say, okay, now I got to get you in services, but oh my goodness, it's going to take me, you're going to be 6 weeks before you get in to see anybody. You know, we can send them up there for an initial appointment. Yeah, you're scheduled, you come back in 4 to 6 weeks and you'll see somebody. Well, what's this person doing for 4 to 6 weeks? We're struggling with them in work release or home detention, trying to keep them in bare minimal compliance, hoping that at some point they'll see someone that can get them started on some medication to address their mental health issues.
yeah, and they're
So they
not
don't get
they're
rearrested.
not bad people. They're not, and you know when you see the next generation and the next generation, you know, this community has failed them.
I, like Deb, have been here long enough, 29 years, and I see the children and the grandchildren of people that I started with when I first started here. Now I'm seeing their grandchildren.
Well,
And
you've all done a good job of
it's the
stepping
same
up with a
thing
program that's going to
over and over.
work. It's
It
going to
really is.
work.
Clarification, so, although I don't see it, it's not in your personal services, you're asking for one pretrial screener, a social worker/therapist. Those are the two additional, but does that tie in with what Bill is
It would
talking
be under
about?
our budget,
But it's still part of them, saying,
the whole idea.
And we put in contractual services for that nurse practitioner.
yeah, then my next question is, does that, psychiatric nurse practitioner tie it in up here with physician that's for mental health evaluation?
Well,
Or are you wanting that?
we kept those because we often have to have a psychologist and a psychiatrist evaluate them, say it for competence. So I,
So it's kind of two different.
I don't think a nurse practitioner. So that's
And then the increases you have for COVID are the office supplies, your, basically the supplemental workers and system hardware, and the temporary service personnel health. Those are all COVID.
And we've kind of made do with our interns for our health screenings. Said, hey, guess what? Show up on Monday, you're gonna do some health screenings, and got the training from the health department. So for now, we've been able to do that. Once
We
they're,
lose them.
we lose them next week. So,
What are you gonna do? Week after?
We haven't gotten that far yet.
I don't know what we're doing yet.
It sounds terrible, but
Have you tried?
we're all learning in this. Literally, each week is a new week for us. I'm sure you guys are going through the same thing.
We, I have contacted like Kelly Temporary Services, only it's called People Ready now, that's the service. And it's $14.99 an hour to contract someone to take temperatures or to ask the health question. So I assume if we don't find someone to do it, that's what we're gonna have to do. And we don't have any money to do that, of course.
But that's a now need, not a, I'm not saying it's not a, in 2021 as well, but it's needed now.
Right, that is true. In a week.
Right. We've just kind of made do sometimes.
Maybe that's a discussion with the auditor because of the CARES Act, if those are
That's what I thought we spent it.
So how do we turn it, when I turn it in, do I just put DWA on it? COVID?
Question? Question?
Do they have categories for that COVID, like certain things that apply, maybe they would set up lines so that. No, I didn't figure it did, but I mean, even if we could set up lines that would work.
So I would just turn in a claim to you and mark it. Huh? Okay, and not, but I wouldn't like necessarily take it out of any specific account. I would put on there. Okay, I'm just afraid if we hire someone and then how, I need to know that we've got the money to pay before we hire somebody to do these health screen, I don't wanna pay them.
So you should have done it yourself.
Just taking it out of your payroll.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, that helps.
I don't, it's not too complicated, is it, Jim? Time consuming, but not too complicated, maybe? Just time. Right. Yeah. Okay.
We had asked Gretchen to stay. Do you want to make any more comments about anything before you leave?
Yeah, she's
Just
got more stuff to tell.
yeah. No, just anything in general, I guess.
She's got more budget stuff.
Oh, does she?
You need to address it, now.
Oh, do you need her on microphone?
We have identified the problem and we need to fund it the best way we can.
Probably need to come from.
Oh, thanks.
You need to come up there.
You can come up here. I can move.
We'll just go.
Come out here.
I've got this. This is great.
There you go.
Unlike my husband, this is usually a sign to run. I'm very short. But I would just reiterate what I had said earlier, that the request from the court is something that is much in need. And I think from the one that Judge Mulligan had referred to as the treatment base and work release, I think this would help reduce the number of people that are being appointed to our office. And as far as target, non-target populations, our office really doesn't differentiate between them. First appearance attorneys are seeing them all, and we're getting appointed majority of them. The only thing that I applaud increasing the non-target population, or target population to be non-target, is that we'll have reports on them. I think the judge is already utilizing court services to attempt to use it, but I think you'll see even a further reduction in failure to appears if we expand that population, because we appear for everybody, but we can see a dramatic difference in the ones we get reports on and the ones we don't, and someone's checking in on them. But as they mentioned, our office was involved in both of those, the trial and the hearing that's coming up, and in almost the majority of all the hearings. And I applaud the courts and probation, and Joe set up a camera in our office. And we have, really been working well together, I think, as a team to effectuate, change in this county for having a remote criminal justice system. So, and they were leaders in the state with the trial. And We did have a not guilty verdict. I'll just throw that in there for our office. But yes, so that's what I can't applaud it enough how things have progressed on. We got the trial done, and they could have said no, but they let it go, and they need the support for whatever they have for COVID response, and they need the support for identifying people and getting them the treatment they need so they don't come to our office over and over again and they get the help they need. Yes.
Where do y'all put the discussion of a diversion, or if we're now calling it deflection center, in all of this? You talked about the 100-bed residency, which I think is a little bit, or perhaps a lot different, or maybe it's sort of part and parcel of the same thing. How can we bring that conversation back into view?
Well, and I think Bill can address this too. We were both attended a meeting at the United Way that discussed executing a plan towards that. And at the time, I think that we realized, and Bill, you can agree with me or not, that the deflection center might be something that is not successful at this time, and that we needed to look down a different path. And so it's not off the discussion table, but it's not something that would cause us to believe that there would be an immediate impact on the criminal justice system. So we actually met afterwards at a parking lot and discussed, what can we do in response? And that's where you see the result of some of those conversations today. So we would, long term, I think a deflection center would be wonderful, but it's not going to be immediate. And we need to take immediate action, or we're going to be here in another year asking for the same thing for the same reasons.
And I realize we've got budget constraints right now, and we need to be careful in this short period of time in terms of what we look at that's larger. But can you tell me what the key aspects were? I don't mean to suggest that the deflection center is instead of all the things you guys, I'm highly in support of all the things y'all have asked for. But
there was not overwhelming buy-in to be one. There was people that didn't feel that. There were some people in the room who just weren't feeling all warm about it.
Because it
just said it needed a lot more information and a lot more data to make them feel that something like that was going to happen through their time. And that couldn't be supplied at that time.
Okay.
They weren't against it. There was people who were for it, some people who were concerned, and some people who just said, we need more information to show that something like this is really going to work. They had some people via video talk about it.
Yes, they did. That were successful. They had a successful program, but they had buy-in from all agencies involved.
And one of them said, I'm not sure your community's ready for this yet, based on what I'm hearing.
Was there any particular agency or set of agencies that were not feeling
I wouldn't say there was one particular. No, there was comments or concerns from different sides.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, each group that was there to represent, some of those groups from their area of expertise, they had some questions that they felt needed to be answered.
Sure.
So.
I know it's a big, you don't just get up one day and say, let's have a deflection center, right? So I understand.
That's kind of what it was, Lisa. They wanted to see more data. We saw a lot of information about the communities that had it and why it was successful. They wanted to see more information from our own community and why it was successful, I think, is what they were looking for.
Okay.
But we decided after the meeting, after sitting there for all afternoon, and sitting in the parking lot, we thought we could do it ourselves in a quicker fashion after listening to them. So there was some success from the meeting, and that would be these programs that are being offered.
If we could do something that we're trying to do now, then maybe that would be the insight for some of these people to say, hey, it will.
The one thing I was kind of hopeful about that facility, even and maybe even especially after we went up to Rockford, whatever, where that place was in Illinois, was the Intercept Zero possibility that you'd get the person, they had a place to go before you even engaged with law enforcement, and or at the point where that would help law enforcement before you then go into the system. Love you guys, but before we get to you all, that there's one or two or 1.5 places where you could even stay out of the system. That's what I was that's what I feel like. I don't want to say I love everything I'm here, but it feels like we're missing something that's there at the beginning.
I think if we can work with this continual problem population, some of them are gonna fail, they just are. I think if we can develop this now and have that on the other end, for those who do fail, that would come back to the system, they go there, Lisa, instead of back into the full-blown system.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
because they're not all gonna succeed. So some of them are still gonna falter.
Yeah.
If we have that at a later point, then we've got that as a starting point for them again, because
Right.
there's been a lot of stuff done with them already.
Right.
Over here, it may just be getting them plugged right back in again.
Yeah, I am seriously, I am not trying to take anything away from where you all are through everything you all are trying to do. So it's just,
Well,
Yeah.
well, if I could say that, I think you got to start somewhere. And I think if this is successful, the buy-in will be there. And I
Okay.
think
And we'll just
right now it's
So
an
this might be on the
overwhelming
path
task
to-
to the people at
Okay.
the table. And I think that if you start with this and they see, well, wait a minute, our arrests are down and that we are seeing success, that you'll have better
well, and
participation
maybe
across
the
the board.
realization that as these services are successful, it doesn't have to go through an arrest for that so then maybe tacking something on at the beginning becomes an easier kind of, okay,
Yeah,
Okay.
easier to
Thank you.
accept. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
I think you're selling yourself short just a little bit. You've started. And any rate, we'll see how we can, we'll have a lot more questions. With your problem-solving courts, with your probation department, I think we're making some progress, personally. How about video court? So I think there's some real things here. So, any rate, I thank you very much for your time today.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Meeting will stand in recess.
Turn your mics off.